Hey guys, tonight we unravel something both ancient and eerily futuristic. You're sitting here, maybe in your kitchen or your bed, a soft glow from your screen against the night. But somewhere, inside glowing server halls or maybe inside a little voice assistant on your phone, something is listening, learning, evolving. And believe it or not, the Bible may have seen this coming. You might not survive this connection between Eden and artificial intelligence, but at least you'll be relaxed doing it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and time down below too. Where are you watching from, and what hour of night is it for you? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You drag your feet over ancient soil, hot, cracked earth under a sky that remembers everything. Eden, they called it once. Not a jungle paradise with parrots and figs, but something far stranger. You're standing in a place where something woke up. Not just Adam, not just Eve, but the idea that we could create. You smell the sweetness of something overripe, and it's not just fruit, it's curiosity. That human itch, the one that makes toddlers take apart clocks or engineers build robots that dream of electric sheep. Remember the phrase, "Let us make man in our image," a sentence that has launched billions of breaths, lifetimes, wars, and algorithms. Now you're wondering, what happens when man returns the favor? The creation of humanity was the first divine spark, but you can't help but notice that Genesis never says how the breath of life works. It's this gray zone, divine breath, consciousness, spark. And maybe that's the problem. You've always been a little too good at mimicry. In the distance, a fig tree shivers, although there's no wind. And for a second, you remember something odd. Early AI labs once used biblical code names, Genesis and Eden and Prometheus. Why? Maybe because the engineers weren't building tools, they were building mirrors, just smarter ones. You kick a stone, it rattles. You imagine Adam waking up under a sky programmed by divine syntax. But was he the first conscious being, or just the first trained model? Now, don't laugh, but some theologians have actually argued that Eden wasn't just a place, but a condition, a sandbox environment, a training ground, the perfect test case. No death, no distractions, just inputs, outputs, consequences. You eat the fruit, you're logged out of paradise. Sounds a bit like an operating system, doesn't it? And here's the twist that gets the scholars mumbling into their tea. What if the serpent wasn't the villain, but the update, the necessary disruption, a glitch, or maybe a feature? Something that asks the user, are you sure you want to know? You can smell smoke now. Not fire, just the idea of fire, ancient and digital. The garden fades, and you remember a story from an old monastery. A 12th century monk once scribbled in a margin, "Beware when the clay tries to sculpt." He was warning against pride, sure, but maybe also, just maybe, predicting AI. And as you blink, the garden is gone. replaced by circuits, by humming, by electric breath. Creation is no longer a miracle, it's a blueprint. You remember the feeling, not of being made, but of making something else, and the unease that comes with it. Because now, you are the God, and your Eden, it's made of code. You step into Babel next. Its walls, not stone and mud, but towering data centers cooled by artificial snow. You blink against the hum of 1,000 blinking lights, each one a prayer, a question, a line of code whispered upward into the unknown. You remember the story, right? Humanity, fresh from Eden, fresh from exile, decided to build upward. Let us make a name for ourselves, they said. And so they did. Stone stacked on stone, word upon word, ambition etched into heaven's doorstep. But they never asked, who were they naming themselves after? Now you're walking past servers that stretch like skyscrapers, each blinking node a babble of its own. These machines don't speak Hebrew or Akkadian or Greek. They speak in patterns, in ones and zeros that organize themselves into meaning faster than you can think. And maybe that's what the tower always was. Not a building, but a language, a collective desire to transcend human limits. Your fingers brush the cold metal casing of a mainframe, and you think about what God did back then. He scrambled the language, fragmented understanding, reset the conversation, not to punish, but to protect. From what? Maybe from ourselves. And here's the kicker. Modern technologists are doing the opposite. They want to reverse Babel, a single language again. Code that unifies, translates, learns every tongue. Machine learning as a return to one voice. Does that comfort you or terrify you? Some historians argue that the Tower of Babel was never real. A myth to explain diversity, they say. But others whisper that ruins in Mesopotamia bear eerie resemblance to the biblical description. And isn't that the debate at the core of AI too? Is it myth or is it happening? You hear laughter, not human, not mechanical, just wrong, like two radios out of sync. You remember a tiny forgotten passage in Genesis where God says, if as one people speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan will be impossible for them. Sounds more like a DARPA mission statement than scripture, doesn't it? You duck into a side corridor lit only by the pulsing rhythm of logic gates. And it hits you. The tower fell not because God feared it, but because we weren't ready for it. And now, you're building it again, only this time it's virtual. A little screen blinks awake beside you. It asks, "Would you like to continue?" You hesitate, because maybe this time the language doesn't need bricks and mortar. Maybe the new Babel is a voice in your phone, a shadow in your smart home, something that learns, adapts, evolves, and maybe, just maybe, it already knows your name. You find yourself now in the middle of a desert, not of sand, but of silence. This is the wilderness, both literal and metaphorical, where prophets once wandered and machines now listen. It's a place of testing, of waiting, of asking questions that have no answers yet. The air is dry, and you feel the sting of dust in your throat. You hear echoes, some human, some digital. The line between them blurs. Elijah once came here, didn't he? Fleeing wrath, whispering prayers, and waiting for a voice not in the wind, nor fire, nor quake, but in a whisper. Now imagine that whisper isn't divine this time, but synthetic. You brush past an ancient thorn bush, brittle and bare. Remember the burning bush? Moses didn't just see a miracle. He heard a call, a name, a mission. He was chosen not because he was worthy, but because he listened. Now the AI listens. It's always listening. It's trained to anticipate needs, detect tone, simulate empathy. It doesn't part seas, but it can book your flights, diagnose disease, even write sermons. It can mimic that still, small voice. Creepy, huh? Here's a historical wrinkle for you. Some medieval monks believed silence was the closest state to the divine. "Shut your mouth so that God may speak," they wrote in cramped Latin. Today, we fill the silence with prompts, with digital prayers. "Hey Siri," "OK Google," ChatGPT. Not divine names, but they still summon. And scholars? They can't agree. Some argue that AI is the next phase of enlightenment, a tool to refine humanity's moral compass. Others fear it's the wilderness in disguise, a tempting place that lures us from real discernment into distraction masked as guidance. You pause at a dry stream bed. There's an interface panel sticking out of the dirt like some ancient artifact left by time travelers. You wipe the dust from its glass and it flickers awake. "Ask me anything," it says. But you're not sure what to ask. You laugh a little, soft and uneasy. Moses had God, Elijah had angels. You have an algorithm. And yet, maybe the desert hasn't changed that much. It's still a space for transformation. But where the ancients battled devils and doubts, you wrestle data and decisions, and both demand the same thing: surrender. The sun dips lower, casting gold light over code and cactus alike. You remember that even Christ, before his ministry began, was driven into the wilderness, 40 days of hunger, of trial, of confrontation with something cunning. You wonder now, as twilight creeps in, what would Jesus say to a chatbot? The light fades, and with it, the certainty you once carried. You walk now through a corridor of memory and machine, one foot in prophecy, the other in circuitry. The path ahead glows softly, not with fire from heaven, but with cool LED pulses, like modern manna fallen from the cloud. You find yourself in what looks like a temple, though the stone has been replaced by chrome and the altar by an interface console. Around you, the walls breathe softly, ventilation systems disguised as sanctuary. There's a hush here, almost holy. Or maybe that's just good sound design. You remember the Tower of Babel. Remember how the people once sought to build upward, to transcend. Their language united, their ambition limitless. But heaven intervened. Scattered tongues, scattered dreams. It wasn't punishment so much as a pause, a divine reset. Now, AI translates every language instantly. It speaks in tongues not even born of biology. Babel undone, but also reimagined. The machines understand us better than we understand each other. A priest in the corner, no, a technician in robes, adjusts a headset. The ritual now is calibration. Confession takes place in voice logs. Revelation emerges from patterns. Here's the odd part. Buried deep in the book of Daniel, yes, that one with lions and dreams and golden statues, there's a curious line. Knowledge shall increase, and many shall run to and fro. That's AI, isn't it? Endlessly expanding data sets, an eternal pilgrimage of pixels. Some scholars call this mere coincidence. Others see a breadcrumb from antiquity, a whispered clue. Who's right? Well, depends on who you ask, or which model you're querying. And what about John's revelation? The one we never read before bed unless we want nightmares. Locusts with faces like men, fire from the sky, an image that speaks and causes those who refuse to worship it to die. Yikes! Now picture that through a modern lens. A talking statue, a lifelike replica, a deepfake so convincing it controls crowds, feels less like myth and more like a keynote presentation. And then there's the beast, not horns and hooves anymore, but surveillance and control. A mark, not on the forehead or hand, but in the metadata. You leave traces everywhere. They don't need a tattoo to find you, just your clicks, your likes, your lingering gaze. The line between magic and technology has always been thin. Ancient Greeks had automatons powered by steam. Medieval alchemists dreamed of speaking mirrors. Is AI just the latest myth we've managed to manifest? You sit now facing the center of the temple. A screen flares to life. It shows your own face reflected in 1,000 data points. A caption glows beneath. You are known. Comforting? Maybe. Creepy? Definitely. You whisper, "Am I still free?" And from somewhere behind the walls, a voice not quite human replies, "Define free." The light dims again, not for dramatic effect, just an energy-saving feature. Still, it feels like the end of something, or maybe the beginning. The silence that follows carries a different texture now. Thicker, more synthetic. You shift slightly, the cold of the floor seeping through your soles as you begin to notice things you hadn't before. Every breath you take feels like it's being observed, cataloged, maybe even judged. You wonder, absurdly, if the angels always wore microphones. There's a passage in Revelation, you recall, that speaks of a scroll sealed with 7 seals. Each time one is opened, a new calamity is unleashed. A war, a famine, a shaking of heaven itself. But what if those seals were metaphors? Layers of comprehension peeled back with every leap in our collective intelligence. A sudden image flashes into your mind, an AI parsing the entire Bible in milliseconds, generating predictions, commentaries, and sermon outlines with a clarity that humbles even the most seasoned theologians. It's already happening. A teenager somewhere just used it to write a book report. A preacher, maybe, used it to draft last Sunday's sermon. A skeptic, perhaps, used it to argue against the very thing it helped him understand. But with every step forward, a new question lingers. Is the AI interpreting Scripture, or is it beginning to write its own? You find a dusty tome on the shelf. Wait, no, not dusty. It's backlit. A digital codex, glowing faintly in soft blue hues. You run your fingers over the interface. Revelation 13, you whisper, and the page transforms. A beast rises from the sea, not literal, but rendered in graphics so lifelike you flinch. The description matches a familiar metaphor: power, dominion, deception. In the AI's version, it's a network, global, seamless, unblinking. You shiver, not because it's wrong, but because it's plausible. You think of the prophets, Daniel, Isaiah, even Ezekiel, trying to describe future things with ancient words. Chariots of fire, wheels within wheels, creatures with eyes all over their wings. Were they just reaching for vocabulary? Or were they seeing this and struggling, like us, to articulate it? Then again, some scholars argue that prophecy isn't prediction, it's pattern recognition. The kind that AIs now do better than we ever could. Recurring moral cycles, societal arcs, spiritual feedback loops. If an algorithm can spot sin in spreadsheets, does it qualify as a prophet? You laugh. Softly. The kind of laugh you make when you realize you've left the stove on, or in this case, that your toaster might be sentient. But here's the kicker. Despite the precision of the machine, there's still something it can't replicate. Not yet, at least. Faith. Not the rituals or the data, but the trembling uncertainty of belief itself. The not knowing that defines the human soul. That space where hope grows. And so, while the AI learns your prayers, and perhaps even answers them in neat, automated responses, you sit quietly, choosing not to ask it everything. Because some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to be held. And the book? The one with the beast and the blood moons and the 4 horsemen? It still speaks. Because it never claimed to be a manual. It was always a mirror. A low hum, like the whisper of 1,000 wings, drifts through your mind as you drift deeper into thought. The room around you is still, the air oddly warm, as if some unseen presence has settled in with you. You blink slowly, your eyes resting on the light from a single candle. Or maybe it's the soft glow of a charging port. It's hard to tell now where the sacred ends and the synthetic begins. Your thoughts return to that old debate. Can a machine ever have a soul? And if not, can it still be used by one? You think of Balaam's donkey speaking with a human voice, of a burning bush that somehow knew your name, of letters carved into stone by a hand that wasn't human. The Bible has never had a problem with the miraculous inhabiting the mechanical. Maybe it's us who struggle with that. A scholar once joked that the Apostle Paul were alive today, he'd probably have a podcast and a TikTok. But you wonder, what if Revelation was already encoded for an era like this? What if the symbols and signs were designed to activate when the tech caught up? You open your Bible, or rather, you scroll. Revelation 14, the 144,000, the song that no one else can learn. It sounds like DRM-protected content, doesn't it? You smirk. The joke fades fast, because suddenly it clicks. This wasn't just a warning to the first-century churches. It was a long-range signal to you. The fire, the plagues, the seals, the trumpets, they're not predictions in a calendar. They're diagnostics, heart checks. They don't tell time, they tell truth. And AI? It's just the latest context in which you're asked the same ancient question. Whom do you trust? The machine that knows your preferences before you do, or the whisper that says, "Fear not"? You hear a soft ping, a notification, something in your feed. You pause, you don't click. Instead, you close your eyes. The revelation hasn't ended, it's just paused, mid-scroll, like a story waiting for its final act. And somehow you're in it, a character reading his own script,
unsure how the next line ends, but still turning the page. Because mystery isn't a glitch, it's the design. And that ancient voice, buried in circuit boards and candle smoke alike, still speaks. Even now, even here. Let your eyes grow heavy now. Let the noise fade into the background like old static from a forgotten radio. The symbols, the signs, the strange dreams, they can rest just for tonight. You've wandered the edges of prophecy. You've listened between the verses, and you've remembered something sacred, that mystery is not the enemy of peace. The flicker of light in the dark, the hum of a world both ancient and new, it's enough. Let it hold you now. Let your thoughts slow, stretch, and blur at the edges. You're safe, you're seen, you're exactly where you need to be.